You're listening to the Soulless Minions of Orthodoxy alternative DVD commentaries. Our movie for today is from 1996. It is called Mother. It stars Albert Brooks, Debbie Reynolds, and Rob Morrow. And I am without Justin today. It is only one minion in the Soulless Minions studio, but I do have a guest with me today, and it is my own mother. Why don't you go ahead and say hello, Susan?
Hi, I'm excited to be doing this. I think it's very fitting that we're reflecting the movie itself and that I am the mother and my son is a co-contributor in our commentary today. I thought that would be very fitting.
Yes, thank you for joining me. This should be fun. So our sync point for today is going to be the black point immediately after the Paramount logo has faded away. So why don't you go ahead and set that up, and I'm going to give you a countdown. I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, unpause. And when you hear me say unpause, you unpause, we'll unpause, and then we'll be in sync together. So go ahead and pause this track if you need to. I'm going to assume that you have done so, and you have it all set up. So we're going to get started here. Here comes the countdown. 3, 2, 1, unpause. All right, we're opening up on a building here. All right. We have Albert Brooks and his soon-to-be ex-wife here in this scene. How do you feel about the start of this movie?
I enjoy the beginning because it's so reflective of really his entire search for the movie. Both sitting there barely acknowledging each other and looking to a third party to figure out things for them.
Well, I got to be honest with you. When I first saw this movie, I did see it with you, and we actually had it on tape. This was before DVD was, really big. We had it on videotape. I watched it with you. It was just you and I wasn't all too thrilled, or I was a little nervous about the opening of this movie. I thought the opening was a little slow. I wasn't quite sure if it was going to work out for me, but the first act, kind of picked up once it gets into the second act, and it's the point right when he's driving to his mother's house, and we hear the rendition of Mrs. Robinson, the remix or retelling or whichever. But I find it interesting here. We're opening up. We have Albert Brooks driving, and this is kind of mirrors the opening of another one of his films called Defending Your Life, where it's him also driving in a he has a BMW, I think, in that movie, but or a Mercedes, but similar, him driving around.
I think there's a scene coming up here where he spends quite a bit of time in his living room, and as we approach that scene, take a look at the walls. They are perfectly white, and we've already learned that she has taken most of the furnishings of the home. It looks like she's actually taken everything. But if you look at the walls, there's no marking on the walls to indicate that there was any kind of life there before she left. Walls generally, when you take pictures down, remove furniture and things like that, you see that, quite a bit of living has gone on. And this room is devoid of that. And I think it's so reflective of their marriage and the fact that the one thing that he came with, we watch him as he moves it from one spot to another. And of course, he does it to almost to the point of being ridiculous and ends up in the same spot with the same thing, which of course is an analogy for his life. He just keeps repeating himself and not being able to move on. As I watched this the other day in anticipation of doing this commentary, although I had noticed it before, the whiteness of the walls, it really kind of spoke to me and stood out. And just thought it was interesting. I know my carpet doesn't look that good, even right after I've just shampooed it. So one gets the feeling that these people were not really connected and didn't do a lot of living in that house together.
Well, those are some really good insights. I never really, I didn't look too deeply into this scene. Maybe I should have. I mean, obviously, this is, I get the reference, him, rearranging, and he can't find it. He keeps repeating himself. That I understand. But I never thought about the kind of blankness of the walls and that kind of being representative of maybe what their marriage was like. It was kind of soulless, maybe like she was, a little bit icy, not too much life into it, kind of bare. I never thought about that. That was interesting. But yeah, I remember watching this with you and feeling a bit worried because the movie was starting off a little slow. But because this was coming off of another one of Albert Brooks's great films called Defending Your Life, which we're huge fans of. It's a great hidden gem. Mm-hmm. And we were big fans of that, still are. And that movie is solid all the way through. It's an excellent film. So we had high expectations going into this. So here we are in the bar. We have a character actor named John C. McGinley. Now,
he does a great job here too.
Yeah, he does. I wonder if he and Albert Brooks are friends in real life, because this is the only scene he's in. The same with Lisa Kudrow, who we're going to meet in a little bit, as his kind of blind date. Not blind date, but just a first date. But they have almost cameo roles, almost. So I wonder if he just kind of knows them outside of acting, and he asked them to be in this. But John C. McGinley, you probably recognize from the TV show Scrubs. He plays a character called Dr. Cox, or he did. I think Scrubs has gone off the air by now. But
it's still in reruns.
It's still in reruns. I'm not surprised. The Brady Bunch is still in reruns. So, but when I see John C. McGinley, I always see Platoon. That was the first thing I saw him in, and that's the first thing I always think of him in. And that's kind of a different role than this one. But
there's a scene that it just passed where the bartender was pouring more for Albert Brooks, more whatever it is he's drinking, bourbon, and his friend says, "Whoa, hold on, cowboy." Just a quiet way of saying this friend's looking out for John, who's already asked him to be a designated driver, but he's taking care of him, unlike the women in his life that he has dated or been married to or whatever. But I just thought it was a very subtle way of showing his how much he cared for his friend, that he's telling the bartender enough.
Yeah, I picked up on that subtlety too, but still he looks very kind of passive, like he's being a friend, but he cares, and yet he seems to not. I think because he doesn't quite understand what is bothering Albert Brooks's character. I guess that's just me. But
I think probably more an indication that he didn't have a mother like John had. And of course, we don't find out till the end what the reason is. But I think he just genuinely just doesn't get it.
Yeah, there was a little moment in this scene, a little subtlety, I guess I didn't notice. It was right there. Mm-hmm. It was right there, that look that he gives him. It was, McGinley said something akin to, you want to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't support you or understand you or believe in you. I think that's what he said, believe in you. And you see that look on Brooks's face, and you go, oh, okay, that's when he has his epiphany.
Right.
He connects his relationship with the women in his life, his past relationships that have failed, to his mother. He makes that connection, and that's where the idea, the experiment, as he calls it, is going to spring from. Here we have the introduction of Debbie Reynolds we're talking over. Anything you'd like to say about Debbie Reynolds?
I would. I found it really interesting. The first person Albert Brooks wanted for this was Nancy Reagan. She was Nancy Davis as an actress, and she actually wanted to take the part, but it was when Ronald Reagan was at the height of his battle with Alzheimer's, and she just couldn't be away from him that long, so she had to decline. And then his second choice was Doris Day. And although she said she would like to, that she was retired and did not do any movies anymore. So he's good friends with Carrie Fisher, who, of course, was married to Paul Simon. Paul Simon's song is at the beginning of this, a rewrite of Mrs. Robinson.
Well, the song hasn't come up yet.
Okay, you're right. It hasn't come up yet. But I get the feeling that he does work very closely with people that he's friends with. Using Paul Simon's song, Carrie Fisher, Paul Simon were married. He calls Carrie Fisher after Doris Day says no, and he said, hey, do you think your mom would be interested in this? And she said, absolutely. And that's how Debbie Reynolds got this part. And of course, at this point, I can't picture anybody other than Debbie Reynolds as his mother. She plays this to perfection. She was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, did not receive the award, but she was nominated. She did, I believe, get a Golden Globe not for Best Supporting, but for Best Actress. So she clearly was the right person, and the third time was the charm.
I think this is she's getting on the phone now. She's going to be talking to Albert Brooks. But I thought that scene was it was a pretty funny intro. I mean, it's a bit over the top. I mean, no TV or installation delivery guys would act that way toward a customer. But I figured, it was a good way to introduce the kind of nitpicky manner of the character before she begins talking to her son. I thought that was a kind of a funny way to introduce her. And she's complaining about the green, and it's all in her, the way she brings out the dialogue and her motions with her hands when she's reacting to it being too green, and it's just all in the acting. I don't think necessarily that kind of thing is on the page. Mm-hmm. It's something that Debbie Reynolds brought. And I was not familiar with Debbie Reynolds before I saw this movie. I don't think I'd ever heard of her. And I don't think I even knew back then that Debbie Reynolds was the mother of Carrie Fisher. I don't think
Banish the thought. I can't imagine that living with me, you wouldn't have known who Debbie Reynolds was, or that this would have been the introduction.
Yeah, no, I'd never seen anything with her in it before, and it was probably only a year ago that I finally saw Singing in the Rain, which is one of her more popular film roles.
This introduces two things for me. The running gag of her inability to do anything that's electronic or...
Well, modern day technology.
Yes. And also, the first thing she says is, introducing to these people she doesn't know, the installers, that her son is getting a divorce again. So, two running gags throughout the movie.
Yeah, they were using the kind of device of call waiting right there. Mm-hmm. I think that's that's still a mainstay on phones.
Yes.
Yeah, people still use that. It doesn't really date it, so that's good.
And I think probably still older people are still struggling with that as well, just like she was.
I think it's kind of funny. I didn't really think about it, but he's wearing all black, kind of like he's in mourning.
Against the white, it really pops.
Yeah, I just didn't really even think about it till looking at it right now.
I love Albert Brooks' writing. He can be very, clear with his message, but he also can be very subtle, which I think he was to a great degree in this movie. That is also another thing that's a running theme in this movie is her appearance, not obsession, but interest in how important appearances are, regardless of how you're feeling. You have to look good. And so she tells him, you have to get some new clothes, get some new, furniture, things that really aren't going to solve his problems or make him happy. But for her, that's the answer.
Yeah, we just had the first conversation between them ended. That was the first time we see them talk, although they're not in the same room together. We definitely get the feel of what their relationship is like, how they talk to each other. And it's going to be pretty omnipresent throughout, is he talks and she doesn't listen to anything he's saying. He made a reference to, I want to make a sequel to the book. And she said, oh, do you really want to bring back all those characters? And he's getting the feeling that, yeah, she's not really listening to anything he's saying. She's responding, but she's not listening. And we have Lisa Kudrow on the screen right now, and we just had a quick insert of the book he had written called Above and Beyond. So we know he's a writer. He's a sci-fi writer, and not a successful one, although he is published. But his writing block is tied, he believes, with his failure with women in his relationship, and later we'll see his relationship with his mother.
I love this line coming up where she asks if he's ready, and he says, well, wouldn't I, I'm here. Wouldn't I be ready?
Yeah, and she doesn't get it. Yeah, she says, what do you mean?
Of course, which gives an indication of how well the date is going to go.
Yeah, they've already started off on the wrong foot, so...
I'll bring it up before. Oh, here it is. Watch her as she eats this salad. I don't know if she actually ate anything, but it fascinates me, the tidbits of lettuce that she gets in her mouth and actually looks like she's chewing. I don't know why that I saw that so clearly, but I thought it was interesting.
Well, that could just be like an actor thing, They don't like to, because when they're doing a scene, they'll usually have what they call a spit bucket, and they'll be in a scene, and if they have to eat, they'll have to constantly be eating. So they just get tired of it after a while. So they'll take little bites, so they don't have to chew as much. I
also got the feeling that maybe she couldn't do two things at one time. This isn't the brightest egg in the carton or the brightest light bulb in the package. So, you could take it that way as well.
Yeah, you definitely get the impression that she's maybe a little dingy.
There is a scene coming up after this where he's walking on the beach, and that's the one thing that I would like to talk to him about, and because there's absolutely no transition. So I would just be interested in what motivated him to shoot that at the beach.
That seemed like a good place for people to go and contemplate their lives, kind of a thing.
That's true. Hadn't thought of that.
But I like this bit right here when she's he just asked her a simple question, and what are some of your favorite authors? And she can't think of any, so she's obviously not very book savvy. But she can't come up with the name of the author of The Valley of the Dolls, Jacqueline Suzanne. So, she's going to come up with Charlie Chaplin as the writer of A Tale of Two Cities, and she's referring to Charles Dickens.
Yes.
Yeah, so the fact that she gets those confused is a pretty funny bit. I liked it. And
I think he culminates that conversation with "Check, please," something along that line.
Well, it's funny. It's just very kind of sitcom-y, So that kind of joke, I didn't, really. It's funny in context of the scene, but it feels very kind of like a sitcom kind of a joke, Yeah, right here. Let's get the check, and we're going to transition into the beach. Well, I think anybody watching this would know that for the first time, of course, he's not going to find resolution this early in the film, but anybody knows that the first date you go on after a breakup is never going to go well. Okay, here we have Rob Morrow on screen. What do you best know him from?
Oh, of course, now my mind goes blank.
Northern Exposure.
Thank you. Northern Exposure. He doesn't venture too far too often from that character. But I always enjoy him. He's a good actor, and although he doesn't seem to have a great range, I do enjoy whatever I see him in.
Okay, now we're getting told about, not only are we getting introduced to his brother and his family, and we see the kind of dynamic that exists, which is important, but the chemistry between the whole family. But we're also told that he has a block, and he's being compared to Stephen King, which is unfair to do to anybody who's trying to write. They're comparing him to one of the most successful writers of all time. Of course, they're going to feel bad about themselves. Mm-hmm. We just had a mention of Misery. But, she meant that in a kind way, but he didn't take it very well. She wasn't trying to be dismissive of him, which is nice. You see it's you take a look around this room and it's saying something to you without actually being over the top. You know, we're seeing things collected around the room. Like he has this trophy case, he has another one, he has collectibles. Shows kind of what kind of person he is. He's very into success and being respected and achievement.
The physical trappings of success.
Yeah, so it's status, you can tell, is very important to him. Look, look at the way the two are dressed. Albert Brooks is dressed very, he's wearing a button-up shirt, but he's dressed very casually. And his brother is dressed like he's wearing a sweater vest, he's wearing a tie, and he's at home, and he's still dressed that way. So you can tell he's very much a businessman, very much into making money, so to speak. And we're told he's an agent. He's a sports agent.
It's an interesting dynamic between these two brothers, how you can be raised by the same parents and have people come out so differently. But then again, there's the theory that no two people are raised by the same parent because, as I say to my oldest son, Justin, who isn't here right now, I used to apologize for the things I did in raising him in the early years because I was a brand new parent. And by the time I got to Josh, my youngest son, I did things very differently. So theoretically, we probably aren't raised by the same parents, but these two are so different. And yet, as the story evolves, you find that as Albert, or John, I should say, said, really, the one that appeared healthy and normal is the one that really has the problems, whereas the one that appeared to have the problems was really very well adjusted.
Yeah, we just had the introduction of the picture phone, which is going to become kind of a running gag throughout the movie. It's a pretty funny bit, and picture phones still not a mainstay in people's houses. Maybe they thought it would be back in 1996 when this movie was made, but still not around. Although people communicate that way through the internet with their cameras and whatnot. Yes. So yeah, I guess it's kind of come about, but in a different way. But I think that these two actors, I think they really feel like brothers in this scene. Mm-hmm. I think they had good chemistry. It comes off pretty well.
And his brother is making some good points here. Your good years aren't that visible, whereas his are. But you can tell that they really don't know each other well. It's more surface knowledge than it is anything in depth.
Yeah, you're right. They can be raised by the same person, but come off so differently. And we're definitely getting that right here. I do get a different sense of a relationship. As opposed to his how he communicates with his mother. When he's talking to his brother is listening to him. Taking in what's wrong with him, but I don't think that. Rob Morrow's character, is it Rob? Did I say that?
Yes.
Really understands what's wrong with him and doesn't know how to help him, but I think he is listening to him.
And I think
right there.
Yes.
No, you're not. Yeah, he just gave him the idea. I'm going to move back in with Mother.
Right. And of course, this is the introduction of this character having to come to the realization that he's really his brother with respect to his mother.
Look at the way they're sitting. It's like they're in an office. They are, but yes. Look how kind of shrunken down Albert Brooks looks compared to his brother. His brother's in a higher chair. It's almost like he's a CEO, so to speak. He's sitting in the master chair.
Yeah, he's in command.
Kind of looking down at Albert Brooks. Do we get a sense of how they're perceived as he's a successful one, and Albert Brooks's character is the unsuccessful one, the lesser of the sons, and as Albert Brooks is referred to as the other son. So here we have the song of Mrs. Robinson being redone.
And Albert Brooks did pen the new lyrics.
I didn't know that.
I believe he did with somebody else, but I know I looked at the end, and of course, being a writer, he would pen it.
Well, this is he actually did co-write this movie with someone, Monica Johnson, I think is her name. I didn't look up any of her credits, but I think Defending Your Life, I don't know if he had a co-writer on that, but oh, go ahead.
There's seems to be some similarities between the two movies. An obsession with food, which I think is probably an Albert Brooks, who, and by the way, it's not Albert Brooks, it's Albert Einstein. That is his real last name. I
had no idea.
Yeah. Bob Einstein, a comedian from quite a while ago who's known as Super Dave Osborne. I believe he used to be on the Smothers Brothers show. I am really dating myself. And I thought at first when I heard that Albert Einstein, no parent would do that. Yes, indeed. That's his official last name. And for those of you that are my age, I'm in my 50s, you will probably remember his brother, Bob Einstein, Super Dave Osborne. Very tall, very funny man, and a bit of information that I think probably most people don't know.
Yeah, and hopefully you have the volume up a little bit on your TV as you're listening to us. But if you haven't seen this movie in a while, I mean, I think the song just ended, but I think the redone lyrics were done very well. And whoever sang the song did a really good job. Because
Yes.
It wasn't Paul Simon.
No, it wasn't.
But whoever did it did a good job. And like I said, the lyrics were really good, very fitting in the movie. And like I said, this is kind of watching this for the first time with you way back when in 96 or 97, whenever it is we first saw it. That's when the movie kind of really started to pick up for me. And I thought, okay, maybe this movie's gonna work out. Because like I said, I had a lot of high expectation going into this because of Defending Your Life. But speaking of when I have another movie on my mind, Albert Brooks, this is a pretty funny bit.
Yes.
She can't get it right. But speaking of Albert Brooks and his movies, they all kind of have the same kind of formula. If you're familiar with his other films, Defending Your Life, The Muse, Looking for Comedy in the Muslim World. Mm-hmm. There's a few other ones, but I'm mainly familiar with The Muse and Defending Your Life. The Muse is okay. I've seen it once or twice. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have it doesn't have the spark, I think, that this movie and Defending Your Life have, but it's okay. But they all kind of focus on Albert Brooks's character. That's how they start off, and they're kind of downtrodden and they're facing a problem. So there's always that kind of first act structure. So, and they kind of follow the same kind of formula. I'm not saying he's repetitive, but kind of that same structure. But it's fine. I still like his movies just fine. But I've noticed that as of late.
Right. There's a scene coming up where she opens the door to his old room. And I find it so telling because the room is piled full of junk that she can't get rid of, doesn't want to get rid of, but doesn't want to be reminded of as well. So she keeps it for appearance's sake, but she closes the door on it, which is exactly what she's done to John. And I just find that such an interesting way to depict her separation from him. And of course, later we find out why. But this scene here is so interesting because, of course, she just is one negative shot right after the other. And it's almost painful, to hear it because, he's struggling so much and she has so little self-awareness. But, of course, being Albert Brooks, we get resolution at the end.
Yeah, and here we have Debbie Reynolds not really listening to anything he's saying again. Yes. We have some pretty funny lines in here that we're talking over.
Everything comes from a cow.
Everything. Yeah, it's a good line. But, when he sits her down and says, I want to get my old room back, and she's like, oh, we'll just talk about this tomorrow. He's like, okay, but I know what I want. Again, she's just not really listening to him. She doesn't quite understand what he's getting at, but she's not taking it all in. And I like this scene. I like this scene a lot. This is our first scene in the kitchen, and she's doing her thing. She's preparing food, and he's even said many times, I'm not really hungry, but she kind of goes into what I call kind of mom automatic. That's what she's doing right now. like I said, when they talk, you get the impression that she's not really taking in what he's saying. But here, she's really not paying attention to him. She's just being automatic right now.
This is a bright woman. She knows that lamb is meat. She knows that stew is meat. And yet she acts like she has some sort of learning disability.
Well, she's just finding some way to kind of criticize him in some way.
Right, exactly. Passive-aggressive. Oh, and here we have the cheese.
Yeah, there's some pretty funny bits in here with the salad and this. Yeah, that's a lot of cheese. Yeah, she buys things in bulk, and there's going to be a pretty funny bit about the invention of a freezer coming up later. But yeah, one thing we were talking about earlier a few days ago was scope of this movie. This movie has a very small scope, and it takes place mainly in this house. I mean, they go out here and there, but even then, it's not a very open film, It's mainly just between these two characters and talking. And I mentioned, I said the word minutia. It's kind of takes place in the minutia of life. Here, this whole scene is taking place in the kitchen. You think they're really talking about nothing, but it does really have a meaning. And later, we're going to be going into a supermarket. And Albert Brooks, that's just kind of the genius of his writing. He creates a whole scene out of something so simple and trivial. You think is going to a grocery store to buy food. He makes a whole scene out of it. And it's the same thing here in the kitchen. They're sitting here having dialogue. It's just back and forth dialogue, and it's taking place in the kitchen. And there's no camera movement. Yeah, this is kind of good. See, this is the kind of thing you can't imagine would be on the page, his kind of facial reactions.
Lettuce doesn't get old. I love that. That's right up there with, it was a good invention. Some things you don't want to talk over.
Yeah, I mean, that's the line I was talking about right there where you mentioned the freezer. It was a good invention, but you're not supposed to put everything in that little box. That's why it's smaller than a refrigerator.
I would like to find out, and I suppose if I did a little bit of research, I would imagine that he's either a vegetarian or a vegan, because this is a recurring theme in his writing and in his different movies, with the exception of Broadcast News, where, by the way, he was also nominated for an Academy Award along with Holly Hunter. Little known movie, one of the best movies I've ever seen, with some of the greatest lines. And Albert Brooks, as always,
I think it's pretty well known.
More so than Mother or The Muse or Defending Your Life, but...
We just set up a great bit. Yeah, the ice cream is colorless. Look under the protective ice. That's a kind of a quote that I picked up. When I see something frozen over like that, I think protective ice, and that's because of this movie.
They can be pretty brutal sometimes with some of the things that they say to each other. Of course, it's sandwiched between two jokes, but you still get it. They zing each other pretty hard.
Yeah, she's insistent upon feeding him. I think that's pretty. This is good. And you're gonna see him dribble the ice cream here, and I got to think that was something that wasn't planned. It just kind of came out when he was saying the line right here. It tastes like an orange foot. And it came out, and they kept, and she kept going. That was good. She didn't break the scene.
Plus, she licks, as he's saying it tastes like a foot. She, licks the back of the spoon, and gives a look like she doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, sorry, we don't mean to be laughing at it. It's a funny movie, but it's one bit in this movie that I find it works within the script, within the story. The fact that he doesn't understand why she buys these kind of generic brands. That's one thing that, like I said, it works, but that's one thing that I can't really support. I mean, I'm a fan of generic brands. They're on the cheap side, and they do pretty much taste the same from my point of view. He's later we're going to see them at the store, and he's going to buy Haagen-Dazs, and maybe Haagen-Dazs is good, but it's expensive. So, I mean, are you really just buying ice cream, or are you buying a pretty box, with a fancy name? So, in reality, I think that Sweet Tooth would probably taste pretty good.
With and without the protective ice. This is the scene in the room that I was talking about earlier. It's so reflective of how, the point of view she's coming from in terms of keeping up appearances while shutting off emotionally from the things in her life that she doesn't understand or doesn't want to deal with.
Yeah, it's a good visual representation of that. It works. But here he's describing, what he's planning on doing. He hasn't really done that with her yet. He's telling her, I want to recapture a feeling. I want to go back to when I was a kid and I was living here and you were raising me. He wants to find out how the raising of him by his mother affected him. How is that affecting his life as a writer and his life as a husband 2 times previous?
Yes. Another running gag with her inability to really move into the 21st century when she says, you know how to get those men on the corner?
Well, that's the other thing I was going to comment on. We're going to have that scene come up here right after this one where he's going to get someone off the street to help him move stuff from, out of this room and then bring the stuff in from the garage. But he could have done it by himself, of course, but, within movie logic, it works. It makes the scene work. But I never really felt it was necessary that he needed to go pay a guy to help him with that. I don't know. It didn't seem necessary to me. I don't know. Did it ever bother you?
I never really thought about it. I guess it served as another point where Mom was out of touch with the way relationships work.
Yeah, like I said, it works within movie logic, but I just found it a little bit insulting, I guess, to minorities too, because obviously this guy is of Spanish descent.
If you take a look here, you can see, in contrast to the walls of the house that he's moved out of, at least for this period of time, his room has frames where you can see he put things. Now, I think Josh could probably remember what his room looked like when he was in high school. I have a very hard time thinking I could go back to my home that I grew up in and put things just as they were. And I just thought that was telling of the character, being a writer, details, and here he is vacuuming the walls. Hilarious. But you can see this is a well-lived-in room. A lot of life occurred in this room. But for me, I'm absolutely amazed that he could remember exactly where everything went.
Yeah, see, it's a funny bit. But look at all this stuff he's putting up. This is Planet of the Apes, 2001. We saw a Barbarella poster. Here we're going to see Gort in the box, and he's going to bring out Robbie the robot. They were right there. These are collectibles. I mean, they'd probably be worth a fortune.
Oh, yes.
And they all look to be in good shape. So I'm not even sure if they paid for any of this stuff. They probably borrowed it from collectors, because I can't imagine this movie had a large budget. It would need to. I'm not saying that it looks cheap. It just doesn't need a large budget. But here is his complete room, and I like it. I like it a lot. I think it works. But we were talking over that whole scene, and that song that was playing was called In My Room, and it's by the Beach Boys. And I love that song now. And when I first saw this movie, I'd never heard it before. And I didn't even know till today that it was done by the Beach Boys. It doesn't sound like the Beach Boys because, when you think Beach Boys, you think of, uppity, Surfing USA, whatever, that kind of thing. But I like the song a lot. It really, really captured the essence of the scene, and it kind of has a dreamlike quality to it, too.
I find it interesting the way Rob Morrow talked in this movie. He really talks in a very juvenile manner, almost whining. And he does it throughout the entire movie, except for the time when he has the confrontation with his wife, and then he gets a attitude of superiority toward her. But that's really the only time he breaks from this really pubescent sounding boy.
Yeah, he does do that quite often. I was going to comment on that. But I found it kind of a nice little touch here that she's kind of, she's criticizing John. She's saying, oh, do you think he'll really be a famous writer one day? You really think so? And he responds, oh, he could be famous one day, Mom. You never know. You know, he's kind of coming to his brother's defense a little bit. And that's kind of that kind of brotherly love thing, I guess. Sorry. That was a really good bit. So she knocked over the phone. I mean, it's a running gag. She can't find where the camera is on the phone, and then she just knocked it over. But through these conversations that she has with Rob Moreau's character over the phone, we get a real sense of their relationship. And most of their scenes together take place over the phone until he comes to the house. And it really sets up the way they play off each other, and it does so very effectively. And here we have John dancing to Land of a Thousand Dances to shake his writer's block. But what I think of a particular movie when I hear that song. Does it remind you of anything?
It doesn't.
I can't hear Land of a Thousand Dances without thinking of the movie The Great Outdoors.
Oh, sure.
With John Candy, Dan Aykroyd. It has, if you like the movie or not, I like it. But the movie ends with all the characters together in a bar setting, all singing and dancing to Land of a Thousand Dances.
That's right.
For what reason, I have no idea. It doesn't mean anything other than it's just the characters dancing and singing together. And it's sort of just like an epilogue to the movie, I guess, or a coda. And it means nothing to the plot of the movie. And it's just, that's the first time I heard the song. So every time I hear it, I see John Candy, I see Dan Aykroyd in my head dancing and whatnot. See, here we go. This is like the brilliance of his writing. He's taking the minutia of life, the little things, and he's making big scenes out of it. We get a whole scene here of them trying to find a parking spot, and you know, him being kind of a backseat driver. But we're seeing it right there. You know, she keeps driving past the spot, and you know, okay, we're getting frustrated just like he is. Very on the spot writing, very good.
And although I've watched this movie many times, I still get frustrated thinking that someone's going to come and take that spot. And of course, there he is, forcing the issue.
Yeah, we're going to get this kind of great little tag on the scene right here. This was the space. It's all in her delivery, but that kind of tags the scene, and you think it wouldn't be necessary, but it just wraps it up rather nicely. It's a good transition.
Here she goes back into her, can my meat touch your food? Where she just has no understanding of his... sorry, I got distracted there by something that's going to occur. You know, her inability to understand that he's a vegetarian and has nothing to do with what she eats.
Yeah, I found it kind of an interesting kind of writing technique, the way he used him being a vegetarian, and she obviously still eats meat, as kind of a way to set them up as polar opposites in a way, to really make them contrast. And also, you know, their inability to agree on anything food related. You know, they can't even agree on peanut butter. You know, he wants the organic. She says like, oh, there's no difference. Just like he's going to buy Haagen-Dazs and she's going to buy more Sweet Tooth. Just like that, you know, she eats meat, he doesn't, and they can't agree on anything. She makes a big deal out of it. Oh, I don't know if you want to have it in the same cart. He's like, I don't care. I just don't want to ingest it. And here he makes a scene again out of this jelly bit, which is a pretty good bit. Which, like I said, with the generic brands, I kind of agree with. I can't imagine that this expensive jelly would taste all that good compared to like a cheap jar. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I agree. I don't know if we've already passed it here, but it's indication of how good his writing is. That she refers to this as she's marketing, and he's going to the grocery store, but she markets. And I thought that was a really interesting way of showing these people are from two different worlds. My grandmother and my mother went to the market. They didn't go grocery shopping. They went marketing. And that's what she uses. And he's just so good at picking up those minute details. Here, of course, again, he's just so good at this. As you can tell, we're both great fans of Albert Brooks' writing.
Well, yeah, you mentioned like she calls it marketing. I think that's probably just a difference between gender as well. Men don't really shop in the same kind of way that women do. Not just for food, just for anything. We don't turn shopping into an event, I guess. Most men you'll see, if they're going in to buy something, will just walk in without grabbing a cart, walk in, walk out 5 minutes later. They know exactly what they want. They don't dawdle or anything like that. There's no schedule or anything. It's just go in, go out. And here she's making a big deal out of the jelly. Oh, the checker's going to have a laugh over this. Mm-hmm. It's a good bit.
There's also a scene where she's real for the first time, where she gets mad at him. And I think she even uses an expletive. But it's really her first honest reaction to him, not tongue-in-cheek or, a zinger, but just honestly.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the first kind of real moments for her in the movie, where you get to really see her let down this mother wall, so to speak, and kind of be herself, because he's pushing her, and he didn't expect her to go that far, but she did. Mm-hmm. But I think it's kind of funny, because I was thinking about this, that he's a writer.
This is the market line. She just said it. You don't know how to market.
He's a writer, and he's had some success, but he's blocked. And even though he's had things published, he's not a very well-known writer. So you figure money would probably be a big deal with him, Like, then why wouldn't he want to buy generic brands? You figure he would be into that kind of thing, just because he doesn't have a whole lot of money to swim in.
It could also be an indication that he has maybe a little more money than they're giving him credit for having.
Here we have two friends, and one of them is the next door neighbor of Debbie Reynolds' character, but Beatrice, that's her name. But she, the woman on the right, isn't she the mother of Mary Steenburgen?
No, the mother on our right, yes. The mother on our right is Mary Steenburgen's mother. She's a wonderful character actress.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen her in plenty of other things. None are coming to mind right now. I guess I can kind of see a resemblance between her and Mary Steenburgen. Now that I'm thinking about it, I remember she had a small bit in Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh, a hilarious bit. When she has the cream, or the whipping cream, when it drips into her coffee off of Robin Williams' face when he's trying to disguise himself.
Yeah, I found it kind of funny that even the mother here referenced Stephen King when she was mentioning her son to them and what he does. They asked, "Oh, what is he writing?" And he responded, "Oh, I'm trying to write a science fiction novel." And she says something akin to, "Oh, like Stephen King." So even she references Stephen King, and the fact that I wouldn't call Stephen King a sci-fi writer, but the fact that they keep referencing him is obviously supposed to make him feel very small and unsuccessful, which it works. And, Stephen King, I think even someone who's not book savvy is a name they recognize because he's so well read by so many people, but also a lot of his stories, his novellas, and his books have been made into movies. We have, The Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile. Then we have, of course, his horror films like The Shining. And people who haven't even read The Shining know that Stephen King wrote it. Maybe not so much with The Shawshank Redemption because he's mostly known for horror, but he did write it. And it is a good book. I've read it, but we're getting off subject here. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on a tangent about Stephen King, but I like him. He's a good writer.
This makes me want to go to Sausalito. I'd like to know, I get the feeling that they probably were filming at the house, at someone's residence in Sausalito. Absolutely gorgeous. Makes me wonder what his father did. Had to be, fairly well off to live in Sausalito, even when these two children were young. That is one of the more expensive places in California. It's right on the beach. So makes me wonder what the father did. So they're used to the trappings of being successful.
See, right now we're having the kind of not all too subtle, but kind of subtle of polar opposites. That she's separating the food in the refrigerator. She said, "I'm going to keep it separate so you don't accidentally eat some meat."
And he makes the statement that he's, frequently ingests things that he didn't mean to ingest.
Yeah, again, just think about the scope of this movie. I mean, we're pretty much all the scenes that have taken place for, I don't know, the past 30 minutes have taken place either in this kitchen or like in the living room. And it's all byplay, like just between these two characters. The movie could probably work as a play, honestly, because it's just so dialogue driven and character driven. And that's one of the things I think that makes it so easy to connect to, because it reminds you so much of like everyday life.
You get an indication here. He's giving you all of these hints that to her creativity, and later to her the revelation that she is also a writer, where the banter between the two of them is so sharp, and it's really they really equal each other, and that's forewarning us that this information is going to come out.
Well, we just had a really important kind of plot bit. He was thinking about it, saying, "Oh, I'll take what I learned from here and I'll apply it over there." And he says, "Hey, that's a very good way of saying it." And he had a little epiphany. And then he says, "What do you think?" And she says, "Oh, I wasn't listening. I'm sorry, what?" So he just kind of made a connection in his own head that, oh, if I can solve this problem, I'll be able to solve that problem, and yada, yada. And again, we get that she wasn't listening. But it's an important part of the overall plot that he's trying to figure out what's wrong with him. And he knows that if he can figure this situation out between him and his mother, it'll help solve the other problems in his life as well, because he knows that they stem from here, but he's not quite sure why. And we don't really quite find out until the third act. We find out that she is a writer, and they're actually more alike than unalike.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going to come up very later. Here, no more food. It's like Fantasia. That's a good line. I like it a lot.
Good line. And when she sits down, first really good comic line from her coming up. I don't want to spoil it, so maybe we can just wait until it comes and then let you listen to it rather than talking over it. I think it's interesting later when her male companion, who visits her on occasion, and quite regularly, that he says something to him about, "Oh, you have food issues as well?" So this is obviously a running theme for her.
Yeah, we haven't, we're kind of a little ways from that character being introduced, the character, I guess, of her boyfriend, I guess you want to call it. I like that they kind of...
Is that a joke?
Yeah.
Where she's sorry that the father isn't there to take some of the blame for her.
Yeah, that she was telling a joke, and he was like, "Oh, did you take down the wall for a second there?" But about the character of the boyfriend, I found it kind of nice. I mean, it's not played too long and not too deeply, but I found it kind of nice to bring in the fact that although she's a little more, elderly, that she's still able to go out and date or whatever, and it's not an issue for her. And the fact that older people can still do those kind of things. You don't really necessarily think of that when you're thinking of someone of this age, but I thought it was a nice touch.
That was a really interesting scene right there where they're both kind of stripped bare, and he's being quite brutal with his feelings about what she's given him and the negative self-image, and she comes back with a pained expression and, "I'm tired, you can berate me more tomorrow." But that was really a telling scene, and one that gives us a good indication that they're going to get into it even further. This I love. To me, this is the definition of being blocked, where you take one word and go over it and over it. And of course, later in the movie, when you see toward almost at the end where an unknown writer is, the words are just flowing out. But to me, this is the just a perfect example of being blocked.
Yeah, I like it a lot too. He's fighting over one word, and he keeps reading the same paragraph over and over again. I'd seen this movie so many times that I had this little bit memorized. I'm not gonna look at the screen. I'm gonna read it. It is morning on this strange planet. We do not know we do not know what is outside. No wait. Okay, I'm gonna start over. It is morning on this strange planet. We do not know where we are, but we are safe, at least for the moment. What is outside, no one will ever know. And I had that memorized for the longest time. I still do, but I like it. It was really funny. I think really subtle. A good bit that he just was anguishing over, should I say nobody or should I say no one? And he eventually decides on no one, but that just, I agree with you completely that, yeah, that's just a good way of just to show a blocked writer that he's just, fumbling over the use of one word.
And here Mom is sitting down to do something that he does on a daily basis, which she hasn't done in probably 25, 30 years. And she does it as if, she was typing yesterday.
Well, here we go. I mean, this also references her, not very familiar with technology, but they had typewriters back then when she was learning. But here we go. This is a first hint, her first clue that there's more to her than meets the eye. He doesn't know her as well as he thought, and she's a typist, and he comments on it. He's very surprised, and look how elated he is. It's like, oh, you're fast and no mistakes too. So there's it's a little hint of maybe there's more to her than he's aware of.
I don't know too many people who leave to go to dinner at 8:00. I guess I'm not of the type that could eat that late, but I just find that interesting that it makes it more of an event than if you go to dinner at 6:00 or 7:00.
Well, yeah, I think I found that people of Beatrice's age in this movie don't eat that late generally, unless it's kind of a special occasion like this is. I think they like to make the early bird a lot, but 8:00, yeah, I think that's kind of the cutoff for dinner. I think 7:00 is a good time. Mm-hmm. Anything before 6, I think, is a little early, but that's just my opinion. But this is good. This is the first time we kind of see them kind of. They're formal but relaxed, and she's having a martini. She's indulging a little bit, and I think it was a good way to let her be a little more unmotherly, I guess you could say, just more of a woman.
I love this scene. The subtleties with the I don't think it's Rogaine, but something that he was using to try to grow hair back. And then when she later asks, do you know how the cane was invented? And he waits for her explanation, and of course she has none. It's fascinating watching these minute character details that leave such an impression. When the waiter comes and puts down what looks like a salad for Albert Brooks, I still haven't figured out exactly what it is that she's eating. Looked quite good, but I still can't figure it out.
Yeah, I like the bit with, she's just finding another way to criticize him when she's mentioning about his hair. Right there, we have the cane bit where she's still staring at him. It's like, how? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, it's Debbie Reynolds. Just like I said, she's so good in this movie, mm-hmm. And I can't imagine. I'm sure Nancy Reagan would have been fine. Oh, the salad.
Yeah. If anybody knows, you maybe and you're listening to this, and you have an idea of what it is that she's eating, shoot us a line and let me know.
Here we have the snooty waiter, but I find it kind of interesting. You mentioned Albert Brooks had something with a fascination with food, and I never thought about it till you said it. And now that I think about it, yeah, you're right, because I was thinking of Defending Your Life, mm-hmm. and there's a whole kind of bit around
Yes.
eating. In the afterlife, you can eat all you want and not gain any weight. So food is a big deal in that movie. And, they go to a restaurant. He gets like 9 pies because he has 9 days to look at. So he gets 9 pies, and he eats pasta, or he gets like the best food he's ever eaten, the best eggs, or what. And he makes a big deal about food in his movies. And you're right. So I guess he's big on food, I guess.
And her idea that it's good luck or bad luck and not individual capabilities, I think, is interesting.
Yeah, this is a good dialogue exchange here. We're getting the kind of setup between him and his brother. He's an agent, I'm a writer.
Right.
But we're also getting a little kind of subtle clue here. And she's just mentioning science fiction. He writes science fiction. And this is the first time she's criticized the genre that he writes in. And we get kind of a clue as to what her tastes are. Mm-hmm. And we've never really gotten that before. And she's saying, oh, why don't you just write about what's really here instead of all that made up stuff? And we kind of get a kind of critical eye from her about his writing that we haven't gotten before. And that's another clue to her character as well. And also the type of stories we're going to find out that she writes.
Mm-hmm. I had to laugh when I saw this scene because I've been writing since I was about 10 years old and started writing novels when I was about 15. And my mother made the same comment to me that I needed to write about something real because I was writing about things that were well beyond my life experience. But it was amazing to hear another mother make a reference that my mother had made to me. And of course, my mother had a very good point. I shouldn't have been writing outside my life's experience. But of course, I was 15 and Albert Brooks is, I don't know, in his 40s, probably. But I had to laugh when I heard that for the first time. By the way, my mother and I did watch this movie together, and her take on it was very different. She really sided much more with the mother than seeing that this was really a dysfunctional relationship on both parts.
I didn't know that you did watch it with her. Well, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about, do you think it's a dysfunctional kind of a thing? I mean, did you not understand her viewpoint at first, or?
I recognized it as a dysfunctional relationship. It was difficult really to like either one of them at times because they were so hard on each other. But it was an accurate representation. This is a very, you don't see this subject brought up much. You see many movies where it's mother and daughter relationship. Still Magnolia is one of our all-time favorite movies that we've also, we like to comment on. Kind of the epitome of mother-daughter relationships. Not many people do mother-son relationships. So this is almost virgin territory. And I felt that it was a very accurate one. And especially when you find out, toward the end that, he represented the thing that she had to give up. And so you could understand. But she, of course, fit into a stereotype. She bought that. She bought into that idea of the 50s mother, 40s, 50s mother, and bought it hook, line, and sinker. So she has very little self-awareness. And so without self-awareness, you're not going to be able to change anything in your life. And of course, she's becoming much more aware of the things she's done, just as he is becoming much more aware of his participation in their dysfunctional relationship.
During that scene, we kind of got a set up for a scene that's going to come up later that's going to be very important. It was the first time that we see the mother, Beatrice, and Rob Morrow's character, her son, talking on the phone. And it's the first time that we see her being dismissive of him. She comes in, he wants her to sit down and, talking to the camera phone. She says, "Oh, no, I'm tired. Let me talk this way." And that upsets him a little bit. But then she says, "Oh, can we talk about it later? I'm just, I'm tired." And he's like, "Okay, forget it then." It's the first time that she's dismissive of him, and he doesn't get the attention that he feels he wants because he closed the deal. He made a big deal. He wants to be patted on the back, and she doesn't give it to him, so he gets upset. And that's gonna. Oh, this is a pretty good bit with the ticket, but that's gonna set up why he's gonna drop by unexpectedly because his feelings were hurt. And he's a mama's boy.
I love the scene with the man behind them. I don't know if he's going to do anything else, but he was almost halfway out of his car, sticking his body out of the open window in order to get her to move. Of course, she was so afraid that she was going to have to pay some money if she took that ticket. And the fact that this was so far away from her house when in reality it was only about 10 minutes away. We talked over the scene where they're discussing, taking the car in and how much money he saved her, but could have voided the warranty. And he said, I'm your kid. I'm not some garage that could void the guarantee. Another good scene here. Of course, we're introduced to her character with the television installers. And of course, the first thing she says is that he's divorced. And now we have it again. And with the next shop that they go into, same thing. She brings up, she just doesn't get it.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good line. He stops the conversation cold and says, "Okay, wait a minute, what's your name?" And he's like, Bill or whatever, Steve. He's like, "Besides selling us stuff, you really don't give a crap about us, do you?" And he's like, "No, not really." But that's one of the other things, before they went to the store, one of the other things, this nitpicky that kind of bothered me when he said, "Oh, let's go to the Gap, I need some underwear." I don't know why he feels he needs to go to the Gap to buy underwear. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's why he likes Haagen-Dazs. Maybe he just wants the name. I don't know, because I've never gone to the Gap to buy underwear before. I just find that a little odd.
I didn't realize prior to this that the Gap had underwear. And is this a $3,000 dog? Is that what you're seeing there?
Yeah. Yeah, it says
or is it
Sharpay.
32 Sharpay?
Yeah.
3,200, and they have them in something that someone could just pick them up and walk off.
I wouldn't know. I've never been in that many of a pet store, but and I'm not a dog person either.
Right.
So if you didn't tell me, if it didn't say Sharpay, I wouldn't know what kind of dog that is. But
they have it right on the.
Yeah, I'm a cat person.
Yeah,
so.
Clearly Albert Brooks is a dog person.
Here's a pretty good bit right here, this close up,
Yes.
And we can't hear it, but they're slowing down her voice, and it's pretty effective. Actually, it's his second divorce. He narrows his eyes. It's pretty good. I mean, again, it's just a sign of her focus on outside appearances, and let me explain why he's this way, so then you'll forgive me, for him being a failure or whatever you want to call it. And I thought it was a pretty good bit. I would be angry too, I gotta admit, if I were him. So this is good. He just had this embarrassing moment, so he's going to embarrass her, and I thought it's pretty effective. He's going to take her into Victoria's Secret. And I would find it kind of uncomfortable if I went into Victoria's Secret with you, Mother. So I can imagine it would be in this movie too, that it's quite effective. Yeah, of course he comes up with crotchless panties, one of the to completely embarrass his mother, and he does it very well. So he's getting back at her. I think it works. And deservedly so. She's been criticizing him since he got down there. Yeah. So he wanted to, get his revenge. And, it's like I said, it's all in the scope. Very small scope, but in the minutia. Like, he makes a whole scene out of, talking to attendants at the Gap in Victoria's Secret. And, she's mentioning, I have to call Jeff, when I get back home. It's like, you've told me like 30 times. I know. Yeah, here we're gonna have a point of contention, argument that's gonna come up. She's supposed to go down and visit with the kids, and she's gonna tell him no, I'm gonna stay up here instead, and I think that's gonna trigger what brings Jeff down.
Right, and also, although they all talk about that she's coming down to visit her grandchildren, that is not the case. She's actually going down to visit her son because her son wants her to come down to visit him. The children are just excuses that he uses. Again, listen to the tone of his voice, and very much like a child.
Yeah, it's very whiny. I mean, I never really thought about it until you mentioned it to me, but it is, and it gets particularly kind of whiny-er as the movie progresses. Like here, and then later on when he comes to the house, he's gonna be all, he's gonna turn back into like his 12-year-old self again, and then he and his brother are gonna get into a little fight, and it just shows that he's regressed to being a child. It's really come to the surface. He's not getting his way. You can tell, and he's really upset right now.
And he loses the whiny tone and gets a superior attitude toward his wife, which I thought was really excellent direction.
Yeah, here he's upset, and he's actually more real in this scene than he's been throughout the whole movie. And this is a true telling of how, like he's grabbing a beer, he's relaxing, he's upset, and his true nature is really kind of coming out. And she calls him on it, and that's going to make him feel even worse. But just kind of shows you what kind of man this guy is. I kind of wonder if these two characters, after this movie ends, if these two characters stay together, because they don't seem to have a whole lot in common. I don't know. It seems more like a marriage of convenience, kind of, not like a real marriage.
She's very comfortable in this marriage because he makes, obviously quite a bit of money. But I got the same feeling. This isn't a marriage that you got the feeling was going to be lasting. And he's not even considering this like his brother is. Again, little self-awareness.
Yeah, I like this scene here when she just said something like, oh, he went down there to find out his relationship with his mother. Maybe you better do the same. I like it. It's necessary that this needs to be addressed to the character in his face, so to speak. I feel it's a little too on the nose. Like, I think it could have been done a little more on the subtle side. I think it's kind of directing you too much. But it still works. It's still effective. It's short. It gets to the point. It doesn't drag on. But I just wish it would have taken a bit of a back way. Like, we know what's going on inside his head, and we know what she's thinking. I didn't think it was that necessary to pin the tail on the donkey, so to speak, visually, or in terms of the dialogue. This is good. This is another one of their kind of dates, so to speak, and we have this thing with the elephant. And
of course, they're retracing what he did with her when he was a child, going to see this elephant.
Another one of the good lines from the movie. Hey, fatty, it's me. Remember? We used to come down here and feed you. Remember? Yeah, it's a good line.
And she's actually enjoying him at that point. She smiled at him. Oh, and then this line. He might not like you.
Yeah, I kind of like this little bit here with the shirt. It's just another way of, he's trying to get her to indulge a little bit, enjoy the kind of, I wouldn't call it, it's not excess. It's just the kind of frivolous things and like, just, enjoy it a little bit. Like, why do you have to buy Sweet Tooth all the time? Why don't you buy a little Haagen-Dazs or, let's go out and then, have a martini. You see she's having a martini. She's indulging a little bit. She's enjoying herself. He's like, and he says right here, no one needs a shirt with their name on it. It's just all about indulging in pleasure just a little bit and letting you enjoy life a little bit, which she's, obviously her life is very based on kind of routine, and he's just trying to break her out of that a little bit.
Also, this is the first time that we see where she's not explaining to a perfect stranger his shortcomings, the second divorce. Now here comes this great scene. Josh was referring to how they become even more prepubescent in this scene when they get in the house, especially when they're in the bedroom. And he runs out of the room just like he was 10 years old again. He really did this well. But that was so good to see him do that, because it was the physical representation of where he was mentally.
Here we go. He just says, "Oh, you got some of that sherbet? Look at the way he's acting. He's happy.
And then he turns.
Yeah. He knows what he's doing, but he's all happy. He's like, oh, she's taking care of me. I'm a kid again. She's showing me attention, and that's what he wasn't getting before. So, and it's see, he's being a jerk. He's not getting his way, so he's being a jerk, and he's trying to make himself feel superior to his brother. He's like, oh yeah, show me your room, yeah, and he's gonna get this really kind of snotty look on his face, and as an actor, he pulls it off really well. Mm-hmm. Look at it. I mean, look at him. I mean, he's being he's stepping all over him. He's like, oh, I think this is tragic, and you don't know what you're doing, and he's just finding a way to feel superior to him, and I think he does a pretty effective job here. He's calling him on. He's like, oh, mommy didn't want to listen to good news, and now you've come all the way down here for that. And it's obvious he's lying. He's trying to cover it up, but I think it's just a credit to Rob Morrow as an actor.
This scene's going to come pretty quickly where he runs out of the room. I would love to have those toys that are up on that bookcase.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that he uses his kids as kind of a defense.
Yes.
And to direct it away from himself. I thought it was an interesting touch. He's like, oh, the kids want to come down, and mm-hmm. They wanted her to come down. They're going to miss her. They're going to be upset. And John calls him on and says, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to do when I was a kid, sit in a darkened room like grandmother. And robot to earthling. That's what he says. Okay. Because I can never make out in dialogue what he says. We have the subtitles on. Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, look, he's 10 years old. It's like, oh, we're going to see what's going on here. And then he runs out of the room. So they kind of regressed to being kids again.
Yeah.
It's a good touch. See, look, he's complaining again. He's trying to get his own way. He's gone from being kind of whiny to being very needy, but there's anger and tension in his voice. And see the way he's kind of bowing his head and he's shaking, and you can see the way that the roles have kind of flipped by this point in the movie. John, although he hasn't figured out what's going on exactly, he's figured out that maybe I've got more together in my head than he does, even though I'm not a success. But you can tell. Look at the staging of the camera work and the way Albert Brooks is standing compared to the way Rob Morrow was standing. He looked small compared to John. Mm-hmm. John was in the forefront, so it's kind of flipped. And you can tell, okay, well, maybe the good son is the one with the problems. The bad son is the one who's actually kind of okay in the head. Here, I get a little bit here about the neighbor overhearing. And this is the first time John kind of gets to be able to poke at his brother. And he's enjoying it. You can tell. Mm-hmm. It works. And like I said, it really turns the tables.
And there's a reference to the video phone. And of course, she's very surprised when she finds out that he paid nothing for them.
Yeah, he said, keep it. Oh, yeah, we get it for free anyway. It's just another good way in the writing of pulling the rug.
Right.
Pulling the rug under from...
They just said it.
Yeah, for free. I told you, some gift, huh? Yeah, pulling the rug under Jeff's character and just really revealing him for what he is, And that's his exit. We don't see him again.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he's gone.
Yeah. I'm sure we're not the only two people that would love to live in this area, Sausalito. Looks absolutely gorgeous. Have to be $1 million properties, even in California's market now.
Yeah, it is nice. I mean, I can't hear the city name Sausalito without thinking of Star Trek 4 because it was mentioned in that movie. Yeah, I know they were in San Francisco, but Sausalito was mentioned. So that's just the way my brain works.
This is where he sees the roles are really quite reversed.
Yeah, and he's looking pretty content.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the first time in the movie we see him feeling that way. And here we're going to get, I think this is where she brings up the date she's going to be on. She doesn't want to talk about it. Yeah.
Very subtle reference to Paul Simon here. One of his songs at the zoo. On the back, it's one of the lines from that song, which I think is interesting because of the connection with Carrie and Fisher and Debbie Reynolds and Paul Simon.
What's the line you're talking about?
It's all happening at the zoo. It's written at the back. I do believe it.
Is that the name of the song?
I believe the title is At the Zoo. The monkeys stand for honesty. Giraffes are insincere. The elephants are kindly, but they're dumb.
I thought I knew every Paul Simon song. I don't think I know that one.
But I thought it was an interesting thread that he wove between the song and this shirt.
Here she just said, oh, what's his name, Charles. So we're being introduced to the fact that there's a man in her life. And this is a very serious thing. And the fact that nobody knows about this, not even Jeff. And he just said, I think someone you're intimate with is pretty important. But she's never told anyone before. Yeah, that's good. Ew. But that was a good reaction. And like I said, I found it very kind of nice. It's not done too over the top. We don't see too much of this character. But I think it's good. It's a good touch for her character, and it lets you know a little bit more about her because we get to see her out in a scene with somebody that's not her son. Mm-hmm. Talking to somebody that's not her son. She talks to him more on an equal basis. But you can see she's still kind of domineering, even to him. Mm-hmm. But
and
I find it, yeah.
Here you learn that she really does brag about him. I forget what the man's name is, Charles, but he just shares with him, you should hear what she says about you.
Well, I like it, the dialogue that Charles and John have when he enters is very kind of small talky. It's very kind of just like in the doorway kind of talk. Not really relevant. It's just like we got to fill up the time with talking until right here where Charles is going to say something that's actually real. And he says, right here, you have the food problem too. Right. That's the first kind of real thing they said to each other. Mm-hmm. And I think it kind of it relates the two of them in a way that shows that, she kind of has that power over him too.
But then you still get the flavor of how she's a little crazy, a little off center here where she talks about, that the police can hear everything that they say. Along with, she makes a reference like she did with the young man that he hired. They're not like us. And she had said the same thing about him. Don't say that. He's not like us. He won't understand.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of a good bit here that they're kind of, although they're both obviously in their, late 60s or so, I guess you could say, that they're kind of regressed to acting like teenagers, yes. In a way, because even though John is the son, they're treating him almost like he's the parent and they have to stay away from him. And they're like, oh, we can't go back home because he's there. It'd be like almost like teenagers saying, oh, we can't. My parents are home. We can't go back there. I thought that was kind of a fun touch, kind of a reverse of things. John was being kind of stubborn. He's like, I want to stay in my room. I don't want to go to a hotel. Mm-hmm. And like I said, this is the only scene we get with her that's taught. She's in a scene with somebody that's not her son. We get to find out the way she relates to other people. And I think it pretty much, it works pretty effectively, but also shows that, she's kind of dismissive of him as well. Just a little bit, but it works.
Again, we have another thing with food. Recurring theme for Albert Brooks. And then, of course, this absolutely nothing of any worth on television. So he then goes into his room, and we are learn for the first time what he's going to find out about his mother and how ahead of her time she was, as he later points out to her. But I think it's interesting that she takes them in, takes all her stories and puts them in hat boxes, something that you rarely see today. So it reflects this truly was from her past, because in the past people did have hat boxes, but nowadays I think you would be it would be impossible for you to find a hat box unless it was an old one. So I think that's a very subtle point in his writing. And then, and obviously to put him away, not even in her own room. She has him in what had become what I would refer to as the junk room, where you just put everything that you couldn't throw away, but you didn't want to deal with anymore. And not only is it in the room, but it's up in the closet, on the far side of the closet, up high, where nobody's going to see it. And to me, that was just a very subtle writing point. And of course, he's almost got it close, and he sees that. And, of course, you draw attention because you don't see hat boxes too often. Probably is thinking, before he sees that written short stories, essays, and articles, probably thinking, I never saw Mom with a hat. Of course, a hat would have been worn and thrown away long ago, when it was originally purchased, when she was probably a young woman. But this is the beginning of his redemption from having been raised by someone who resented him. And it makes me, I wonder who wrote this. I'm sure it was probably Albert Brooks. But it's fun. As a writer myself, it's fun to take writing from somebody else and put it into your work and reword it, which is kind of what he did here. But I would like to ask him where he got this idea. I believe his mother was an actress, and how much of this was based on his relationship with his mother.
Yeah, I like these little kind of bits in movies, where we have, other little titles, and here we're going to see like the little bit of a paragraph here. I always like to pause the movie and kind of read it and see what it says and wonder like, well, what's the rest of the story like?
I think the same thing, and I want to pause it and read.
Yeah, like I like the titles he comes up with. I know one is called like Irene Takes a Lover, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool title. I like it. And
the facial expressions when he reads that title speak volumes. And just subtle things like change of position tells you how long he's been there. And of course, now you're going to see her in a really revealing moment where all of her walls are stripped down, and she's just, his mother, and disappointed and upset with him, and not putting on any airs about it, but being just very honest. And of course, that's the beginning of their rebirth as not only as mother and son, but as writers and as individuals independent of each other. This dress, I think, is a good indication that she has a good amount of money. That's an expensive dress she's wearing.
Well, yeah, I think actually the color is important too. It's red. Red's the color of passion and youth almost. Is a good choice. Here we get a big switch. She's very upset.
Yes.
Yeah, this is very personal to her, and you can tell he's quite surprised. But I think that I thought that was a good little bit. He's very anxious, and like I said, it kind of regresses them to teenage years. But I like that we were talking over the him reading, and it kind of transitioned between shots to show that time had gone by, but it showed him, laughing out loud and really getting into it. And I mean, laughing out loud at a book, that's not something I do that often. And when I do, it shows I'm really enjoying it. So I thought that was pretty effective to show that he was really getting into it. But look how upset she's getting. You've never seen her get this angry before. And yeah, she's like, oh, I've had this stuff up there for a reason. Why did you bring it out? How could you do this to me? You can tell she's really hurt. Yeah, and this is the first time we see the living room, and this is, he actually calls her on it when he says, oh, look, we're actually using the living room, and we haven't been in this room before. And like I said, it's just the brilliance of this script, Most of the movie takes place in a few outside locations. Mostly it's in the family room or whatever, the kitchen, and a few scenes in the car. That's it. It's just all the dialogue between these two. This, like I said, it could be a play. But you could tell it's really struck a nerve with her. And the camera's keeping her in the forefront, him in the background. And we really get to see the way his dialogue is playing off of her face. I think that's really important. And we're learning about her past. And, there's a line coming up that's going to address something about her past. I'll mention when it comes, a line that I really like. Of course, she pulls out a cigarette, which is the universal sign in movies that someone is stressed. They pull out a cigarette. Yeah, she just said, oh, I have one when I'm feeling this way. So we're getting another clue. But the fact that she was a writer is a big, that's when the shoe dropped, and we figure out, we haven't been told essentially what's been going on, but we're starting to put the pieces together.
A perception. She remembers this incident in one way, and he remembers it in a totally different way. And of course, he has a revelation that, oh, this is where I came up with the idea.
I know, I like the way you deliver that. That's why I write about big heads. And I like that the fact that they argue over this. It's a good sign of, they're both writers, but they're both kind of creatively inclined. And he has a way of defending it. Not really. I mean, he kind of defends it, but he doesn't come up with a good explanation. And right there, he's like, well, maybe some of it's empty. It's like, it's just like, oh no, God's going to create something like that. Come on. And she's actually criticizing, critiquing his work for the first time. And it shows a creative side to her that we haven't seen before. I thought it was a good way to show that, the fact that they're arguing over the character of the big head. And he calls her on. He's like, I don't know how we got on this subject, but you should look at yourself. You're all lit up.
And whereas their conversation before this was really just one-liners, now they're really having a conversation. This is their first real conversation. And here, as she's walking away, and she's allowing the anger to, calm down in her, and she goes back, because now, the writer in her has been shaken a little out of its sleep, and she wants to go back and say, what is it that you liked? She's in virgin territory here, and it's kind of like sticking your toe in the water. She's approaching him very demurely and not as forcefully as she left him. And I think that's excellent directing, and just so intuitive in her acting.
Yeah, he had that joke about Woodward and Bernstein. That's referring to Nixon, right?
Right.
I never really got that joke.
Oh.
But I think it's because I didn't know who Woodward and Bernstein were
sure.
when I first saw it. Like, I never heard their name before, but that kind of just flew over my head. I thought they were other writers, not journalists. I think that's why. What, did we miss something?
That past was plopped all over in our lives. So true.
What past? Did I miss something?
She was saying that was in the past. Let's not talk about that, And he says, well, but the past is right here. It's plopped right here in the middle of our lives.
Okay, you said past. I thought you said pass. Okay.
Oh.
Right there, you just said out loud. Yeah. And then
And there's she.
you can see it in her eyes, and well, my goodness, I never heard it put exactly like that. Yeah, she's having her epiphany. John has had small ones, but she has a really big one, and she says something that sounds negative, it sounds mean, but it's not really. It's exactly what he needs to hear. He needs to hear, why can't you connect with me? Why? What did I do that separates me from you so much? And she needed to say that, and he needed to hear it, because now he knows this is why we can't connect, because you've shoved the part of yourself that's me so far deep down that we can't connect on any way that's completely on the surface, that's what's the word I'm looking for? Superficial, any kind of superficial way. And why we can only fight about things like, Sweet Tooth and Haagen-Dazs. Yeah, like he's calling her on it. Like, no wonder why you like Jeff, because he's not the writer. He's not the creative one. He doesn't represent what you've had to hide. So of course you can connect with him, not with me. And, when at this point in the movie, when you look back at the times when he was talking about his writing, and you think, she wasn't, she never really did want to talk to him about it. She was always kind of just, kind of half there, half not. She just didn't really want to go into that territory. And you can understand why now. And it's a good flashback moment. Now, right there, he had that line, I see you as a failure. Now, I know that's a point of contention for you. And it's never really bothered me all that much. I didn't think it was necessary for him to say failure. But you never liked that line. Do you want to say why?
Yeah. This is very difficult for me, because he could have chosen another word. She's not a failure. She's a compromised woman, and there's a difference. And because he's such a good writer, that one word really turned it for me. In fact, my oldest son, Justin, as you know, has edited the movie and actually edited that line out for me. I would love to talk to him and just say, have a debate with him and just say, she wasn't a failure. She was a compromised woman. She did what she had to do. She did what society expected of her. That wasn't a failure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe it would have been easier to swallow if he said something like, I don't see you as my mother. I see you as a writer. Or I see you as a woman. Something else. He didn't have to say failure, because you're right. She isn't a failure because of anything she did. She obviously had the talent, and she still does. But she was compromised. She had to give up her true passion in order to satisfy her husband, which was a common thing to do at the time. And she addressed that, and she became a house mom, And here we get this. This is nice. They joke to each other, and this is the This is
the beginning of their new relationship.
Yeah, you can tell they're really actually paying attention to each other now and connecting to each other, because he's like, the great. Go ahead.
He has just accepted something from her that was a criticism. I'm even going to go out and buy myself some new clothes. And she counters with, can I get some, he says, go out and buy some cheese. Does Kraft count? So an indication that each one has listened to the other one. And this is not an obligatory hug or kiss, which they've always done before. That was genuine.
Yeah, it's good. You can tell there's a real affection in her voice. As there's no automatic sense. Like when she was trying to feed him earlier in the movie, she's actually kind of affected emotionally.
And the fact that she didn't walk away, she watched him until he was out of her sight. Whereas before, when he first gets there, she opens the door, waves at him, and then goes back in the house, closing the door.
Yeah, she was talking to Jeff. She's like, "Oh, I'll be right there," and just goes back inside. And he's like, "I just drove 400 miles. She can't come out and say hi." So it's a really effective, subtle way of saying how the situation is flipped. How do you feel about this scene in the movie as a coda? I never really felt it was all that necessary, although I feel it works. I didn't think we needed it.
I liked it.
Yeah, it's cute.
Although he's going to go on because he's worked out his problems, it's still nice to see the person that maybe he's going to settle down with and find the love of his life. And
Well, yeah, his motivation for getting into this situation with his mother was because of his failure with women. And, it's important to see him succeed in some kind of aspects in this sense. And he's succeeding in both instances right here. He's meeting a woman and it's going well. And she's also a fan of his writing. So he's winning 2 times as a writer and as a possible man in her life. So he's winning twice. And I can imagine how good that would feel if I was a struggling writer and I met someone who'd actually read one of my books. I would be excited beyond belief. So I can imagine that, his character would be too. And the fact that you read the whole book, like the whole thing from cover to cover. And this is, like I said, it's a complete contrast from the beginning, as with his mother, with the Lisa Kudrow character. She didn't even read the book. She's like, oh, I saw your picture. I thought it was cute. It's just a big flip. He's actually met a fan who's a woman. She's very attractive.
Very.
So they're going to get together and you're like, okay, maybe they'll go out and have a date, but things are looking up for him. We don't know how they're going to end up, but yeah. But like I said, I didn't really need the scene, but it works.
I liked it. I needed the scene. Also, I think that it was interesting that she was just naturally beautiful. She was not dressed. She was dressed very casually, but still very attractive woman compared to the woman he was married to. It was much more a professional look and, backed up by the sterility of the home. And of course, here we have the mystery writer.
Yeah, this is good. This is a good way to go out on the movie. We see her writing. She's writing. It was a very bold experiment. She's writing about the experiment. So we can see how much the experience has affected her, and it's good. I think the reason why maybe that scene bothered me a little bit, like I said, it was cute, was it's so movie, It's so convenient. Right after he leaves his mother's house, he meets the woman he's probably going to end up marrying and is a big fan of his novels. It's so convenient and just a movie thing. Maybe that's just why it bothered me a little bit. But right there, she just hung up on Jeff. She's like, I'm busy right now.
Right.
And the movie's going to fade out on her, I believe. Yeah, it's going to fade out on her, which is just what we need. All right, so the credits have started to roll. We've just watched Mother together, and we hope you've had a good time watching and listening with us. And here we have the song playing Mrs. Henderson again, which I said it's a really good touch to the movie, and I'm glad we had it. I couldn't imagine this movie without it, so I'm glad that Albert Brooks was friends with Carrie Fisher, was able to get Paul Simon to let her use it.
Well, I'm sure he's probably friends with Paul Simon as well.
Well, now he is, yeah. But yeah, any closing thoughts, Mom, that you'd have on this movie?
The one thing I would like is that people would become more aware of just what a great writer Albert Brooks is and watch these lesser known movies. Defending Your Life. If you haven't watched it, pick it up. You won't regret it. It's a wonderful, wonderful movie. And again, like Mother is not a subject that's really been filmed, has many films to its credit. Mother-daughter, yes. Father-daughter, yes. But not mother and son. And Defending Your Life is the same thing. It's about a topic that really hasn't been covered that much in the way that he covers it. So that's my parting thought, that, maybe the people that are listening to this could suggest to people they know that maybe haven't watched it, to pick up the film and recognize really what a great writer Albert Brooks is.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. And as my closing kind of thoughts here, I would recommend the same. Just go out and tell people, check out Mother, tell them Albert Brooks is great. He is a good writer. Of course, Defending Your Life will always be my favorite of his. This will be a close, very close second. But as you can tell, as we've talked, we have a great affection for this movie. And it's stuck around with us over the years. I mean, this movie's over 10 years old, and we still watch and enjoy it today. It's been a good, fun time sitting here talking with my mother, watching the movie Mother. Mm-hmm. And I hope you've enjoyed it as well. So we're going to leave you here with the credits. And this is Josh saying so long and good night. I'm signing off.
And this is Josh's mother. Hope you enjoyed our commentary. We certainly enjoyed this film. Good night, and I might be back as a guest on another film.
Well, actually, I wasn't signing off. One last thing. Don't forget to check out our website, soullessminions.libsyn.com. Or please, 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 if you're a fan and listen to our stuff, visit our community forum. It's lonely there, very lonely. You need to drop by and give us some posts, show us some love. It's soullessminions.yuki.com, YUKU. And also, I'd just like to mention a great podcast I've been listening to called Treknologic. If you're a Star Trek fan, please check it out, treknologic.com. They've been very nice in giving me a plug. I thought I'd exchange the favor. So here we go. Movie just ended. This is Josh again saying good night.